Okay, so we're diving deep today into this ACC tournament game.
Yeah.
Florida State and Syracuse coming up Tuesday,
Big one.
March 11th
Yeah.
at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
7 p.m. tip-off.
That's a big game lot riding on this one.
Absolutely.
We've got a bunch of articles here, predictions, player comparisons,
A lot of good data.
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Really want to take a look and see what we can find out about this matchup, see who's got the edge.
Absolutely break it down for you.
All right, so first up, Bleacher Nation has Florida State favored by 2.5 points.
2.5, yeah.
Which, in a tournament game,
That's nothing.
that's basically saying it's a toss-up.
That's razor thin.
Yeah.
Could go either way.
So what do you think that tells us right off the bat?
Well, I think it tells us that we're in for a really close one.
Yeah.
You know, the money line actually kind of reflects that too. Florida State's at -162, Syracuse +136.
Okay.
So what that means is that the odds makers are saying Florida State's slightly more likely to win.
Right.
But if you bet on them, you won't win as much as if you bet on Syracuse.
Okay, so they think Florida State is more likely to win, but they don't think it'll be a blowout or anything.
Exactly. It's going to be close.
Gotcha. And what about the over-under?
Oh, yeah. That's set at 151.5 points.
All right, so that's hinting at a bit of a higher scoring game.
Yeah, I think we could see some points put up in this one.
Okay, so we've got a tight one in the eyes of the bookmakers, potentially high scoring.
Could be a fun one.
What about some other expert opinions? What are they saying?
Well, we've got pick dogs. They're also favoring Florida State by 2.5 points.
Okay, so they're agreeing with Bleacher Nation there.
Yep, pretty much on the same page.
And then one of our sources, cusufnews.pdef. Their computer model is giving Florida State a 60% chance to win.
60%. That's a pretty significant edge.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee or anything, but that model is definitely leaning towards Florida State.
Yeah, and they even gave a predicted final score. Florida State 78, Syracuse 73.
Oh, wow. So that would actually cover the spread pretty comfortably.
Yeah, it would. That model's really liking Florida State.
Okay, let's take a look at their records against the spread, because, that can give us an idea of how they perform relative to expectations.
Definitely worth looking at.
So when Florida State's been favored by 2.5 points or more this season,
Okay.
they've covered the spread in 10 out of 14 games.
Wow, so over 70% of the time.
Yeah, they're not just winning, they're winning by more than the odds makers think they will.
That's a good sign if you're a Florida State fan.
What about Syracuse? How do they do as the underdog?
Well, they've covered in 10 out of 18 games as an underdog of 2.5 points or more.
Okay, so they're not bad.
No, they can definitely keep it close even when they're not favored.
But it sounds like Florida State's record when they're favored by this much is pretty good.
Yeah, it's something to keep in mind.
What about their overall against the spread records for the whole season?
Well, over the whole season, Syracuse has actually been a bit better at covering. They're 17-14 and compared to Florida State's 16-14.
Interesting. So overall, Syracuse has been a bit better, but it seems like in this specific scenario, when Florida State's a slight favorite, they do pretty well.
Yeah, that seems to be their sweet spot.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to some key team statistics. Maybe these can shed some light on those betting trends.
Sounds good.
So scoring and defense, how do they stack up?
All right, so Syracuse averages a little bit more points per game, 75.6 to be exact. They're ranked 128th in the nation.
Okay.
While Florida State's not too far behind, 74.9 ranked 148th.
So pretty similar in scoring.
Yeah, pretty close.
Right.
But when you look at points allowed, that's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Florida State only gives up 72.7 points per game, on average ranked 203rd.
Okay.
While Syracuse gives up a whopping 78.4, ranked 332nd.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, Syracuse can score, but they give up a lot of points.
So even though they score a bit more, they're giving up almost 6 more points per game.
Yeah, their defense is definitely their weakness.
And what does that mean for their overall scoring differential?
Well, Florida State has a positive scoring differential, plus 68 for the season.
Okay, so they're outscoring their opponents overall.
Exactly. And Syracuse has a negative differential, minus 86.
Oof.
Yeah, that just shows you how much their defense hurts them.
Okay, so Florida State's got a better balance between offense and defense, even if they don't score quite as much.
Right.
What about rebounding? Who owns the boards?
Well, Syracuse has a clear advantage there. They average 33.7 rebounds per game, ranked 79th in the country.
Okay.
Florida State, on the other hand, only averages 31.3, ranked 212th.
All right, so Syracuse looks like they'll be winning the rebounding battle.
Most likely.
But, in a close tournament game, efficiency can be key. So let's look at points per 100 possessions. What does that tell us?
That's a great way to see how efficiently they score and defend adjusted for pace.
Right.
So Florida State scores 94.2 points per 100 possessions, ranked 223rd.
Okay.
And they give up 91.4, ranked 130th.
All right. And Syracuse.
They score a bit better, 96.0 per 100 possessions, ranked 175th.
Okay. Right.
But defensively, they're way down there, giving up 99.5 per 100 possessions, ranked 334th.
So even when you adjust for pace, that defensive issue is still there for Syracuse.
Big time. They give up a lot of points no matter how you slice it.
All right. So their offense might be a tad more efficient, but the defense is a real concern.
Yeah, it's a big problem for them.
Now, what about head-to-head this season? These teams split their regular season matchups, each winning at home.
Yeah, that's right.
Florida State won 90-74 in Tallahassee, and Syracuse won 90-74 in the Carrier Dome.
Looks like home court advantage was a big factor.
Yeah, for sure. But, looking at the scores, Florida State's win was a little more decisive. They won by 16.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Well, Syracuse also won by 16, but it was a bit closer.
Interesting.
So maybe that tells us something about their relative strengths.
Oh, good.
What about their performance against some common opponents like North Carolina and Clemson?
Well, they both lost to both of those teams.
Okay.
Florida State's losses were 85-96 against North Carolina and 46-72 against Clemson.
Okay, so they got blown out by Clemson.
Yeah, that one was rough.
And Syracuse.
They lost 82-88 against North Carolina and 72-86 against Clemson.
So they kept it a bit closer in both of those games.
Yeah, they didn't get blown out like Florida State did against Clemson.
But both teams struggled against those top ACC teams.
Definitely.
Okay, let's talk about some key players.
The guys who can make a difference.
Right, one of our sources actually said there weren't any explicitly identified key players with detailed stats for both teams.
Oh, really?
But they did mention this guy, Malik Ewan, for Florida State.
Okay.
Apparently, he's their most improved scorer this season.
Interesting.
Yeah, his scoring average went up by 12.6 points per game.
Wow, that's a huge
Wow.
jump.
I know, right?
Goodness.
That kind of improvement could be a real game changer.
Yeah, especially in a tournament setting.
Now, our other source does give us some more detailed player stats.
Oh, good.
So who are the standouts we should be watching?
All right, so for Florida State, you've got Jameer Watkins leading the way, 18.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2.4 assists per game.
All right, so he's their main guy on offense.
Yeah, he's the go-to guy.
And what about rebounding and assists?
Well, Malik Ewan is their leading rebounder at 7.8 per game, and Daquan Davis leads in assists with 2.6.
Okay, so Watkins, Ewan, and Davis, those are the names to remember for Florida State.
Definitely.
What about Syracuse?
All right, so their leading scorer is J.J. Starling, averaging 17.5 points per game.
Okay.
Eddie Lampkin Jr. leads in rebounding with 9.6, and he also puts up 11.5 points.
So he's a double-double machine.
Yeah, he's a force down low.
And assists.
Jaquan Carlos averages 4.1 assists per game.
Okay, so Starling, Lampkin, and Carlos for Syracuse.
Yep, those are the key guys.
So there's some big news regarding Syracuse's roster for this game.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
Apparently, Donnie Freeman, their second leading scorer, is out with an injury.
Oh, no, that's a huge blow for them.
I know, right? He was averaging a good amount of points and rebounds for them.
Yeah, that's going to put a lot more pressure on Starling and Lampkin to carry the load.
Absolutely. Losing a key player like that in a tournament game is never good.
It's really tough to overcome.
All right, so now let's talk about the fact that this game's being played at a neutral site in Charlotte.
Right, the Spectrum Center.
Do either of these teams have a history in neutral site games?
Actually, this is where we see a pretty big difference between them.
Oh, really? Yeah, Florida State has won their last 4 games at neutral venues.
Wow, so they seem to thrive in that environment.
They do, and on the flip side, Syracuse has lost their last 4 night games at neutral venues.
Interesting. And since this game tips off at 7 p.m. Eastern Time,
That's a night game?
that could be a big advantage for Florida State.
It could definitely play a factor.
Okay, now let's talk about free throw shooting, something that can be really important in close games.
Absolutely, every point counts.
So any insights there?
Well, we noticed that Daquan Davis went a perfect 10 for 10 from the free throw line against Syracuse earlier this season.
Wow, that's clutch.
Yeah. And as a team, Florida State ranks 42nd in the nation in free throws made per game.
So they're pretty reliable when they get to the line.
Yeah, they make their free throws.
And what about Syracuse? Any weaknesses there?
Well, one source mentioned a game where they went 0 for 9 from three-point range.
Yikes, that's a rough night.
Yeah, it happens, but it shows they can go cold from outside. So if their three-pointers aren't falling, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, that's a potential problem for them.
Okay, so let's put it all together. What are the main arguments for each team?
All right, let's break it down.
Let's start with Syracuse. What are their strengths?
Well, they have a slightly more efficient offense than Florida State,
Oh, okay.
and Florida State has had some losses against ACC opponents recently, so maybe there's a bit of a vulnerability there.
All right. But
Yeah.
they're missing their second leading scorer, Donnie Freeman.
Yeah, that's a huge loss for them.
And they haven't been doing well in neutral site night games.
Yeah, those are some big red flags for Syracuse.
So what about Florida State? What makes them the likely winner?
Well, they've got a better overall record than Syracuse, 17-14 compared to 13-18.
Okay, so they've been winning more games.
Exactly, and their defense is much better. They give up significantly fewer points per game.
Right. We talked about that.
And their scoring differential is positive, while Syracuse is negative.
So they're not just winning, they're winning
Yeah.
convincingly.
Exactly, and they've got that winning streak at neutral venues, which is a big deal considering where this game is being played.
Yeah, that's a huge advantage for them.
Plus, Syracuse is going to be without Freeman, which hurts their offense and rebounding.
Right, and Florida State is a good free throw shooting team, which can be crucial in close games.
Yeah, those little things can make a big difference.
And that computer model is giving them a 60% chance to win and predicting they'll cover the spread.
So all signs point to Florida State.
All right, so to recap, the game is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time at the Spectrum Center in Charlotte.
That's right.
So based on everything we've discussed, what are the key takeaways for this matchup?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that Florida State just has more going for them. They've got the better record, the stronger defense, the positive scoring differential, and they've been playing well in neutral site games.
Right, and they're also a good free throw shooting team, and Syracuse is missing a key player.
Yeah, all of those factors add up.
And all the experts are picking Florida State to win and most likely cover the spread.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with the data.
So here's our final thought for you, given all of this. Is there anything that could really derail Florida State in this game?
That's a good question.
Like, is there some statistical anomaly we haven't considered or some unforeseen circumstance that could swing things in Syracuse's favor?
It's always possible, but it seems unlikely.
Or maybe there's some small detail that could be the deciding factor, like a specific player matchup or a coaching adjustment.
Yeah, maybe Syracuse comes out with some crazy defensive scheme that shuts down Florida State's offense.
Or maybe one of Syracuse's role players steps up big time in Freeman's absence.
Anything's possible in a tournament game.
Exactly. So what do you think? Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Thanks for listening.